Hey, you're listening to our Fantastic Four review on Midnight's Edge. With you, as always, is Kevin and Andre.
Hi, guys.
So Andre has been lucky enough to catch an early showing of Fantastic Four. So tell us, what were some of your thoughts on the movie?
The movie overall is pretty uneven, and you can tell that it's fixed after the fact by a committee. This is clearly not the work of one filmmaker. Simon Kinberg was right when he said that the movie is not a disaster, but that's the best you can say about it. It's certainly not a good movie. It has some good moments in it. It has potential, but then they make these mistakes that just take away from the whole movie.
Yeah, and so we'd heard all along that, maybe Kinberg was doing some reshoots. Maybe Matthew Vaughn, even, producer from X-Men, director of Kick-Ass and The Kingsman, had even chipped in on it. I mean, are there any telltale marks that you think would have pointed to either potential directors?
I can't really say which director did what. I don't really see any distinguishing features of any particular director in there. But you can very clearly see what are reshoots and what is from the original footage or from the original shoot by Josh Trank. And the one clear indicator is Kate Mara, or rather the wig she wears, because she had to cut her hair for another role in between the original shoot and the reshoots. So she has this really, really obvious, horrendous wig. And I don't know how they couldn't see that, because it's so obvious. Like in one scene, she has her natural dark blonde hair, and in the next scene, it's this super blonde, obviously fake wig, and then you're back to her natural dark blonde hair again afterwards. So you have like these clear markers of what is the original footage and what is the reshoots. And then we also know that Dr. Doom's character, his name was changed from the original shoot to the reshoots. So any scene where he is referred to as Doom rather than Domashev is clearly a reshot scene. As you all know, here at Midnight's Edge, we have covered the movie for some time, so we have a pretty good grasp of what has gone down behind the scenes. Still, when I now go to see the movie, I do my best to put all of that behind me and even try to forget that it's supposed to be an adaptation of Marvel's The Fantastic Four, and instead I try to view it as a movie in its own right, just a standalone movie, and see how it works as that, because clearly it is not going to be the Fantastic Four from the comics. But it can still be a serviceable movie, and that is what we have to judge it for first and foremost.
Even though we've covered the movie in a pretty negative light, and I think people should understand why, is because we've got what's basically a rights grab here. No matter how the movie turned out, it was always just the intent to keep these rights from falling back into Marvel's hands. So I think that's one good reason to have viewed this movie through a filter of skepticism. But in any case, you're right. There's a standalone movie there, and I'm glad you were able to approach it from that point of view.
I certainly did my best, and the movie as a whole is very uneven. It's clearly the work of several different filmmakers and several different visions. It really comes across as a movie by committee. Simon Kinberg is right in that the movie is not a disaster, but it is also not good. It's certainly not good enough for 2015. This movie right here, this would have been serviceable in 2005, but it doesn't cut it anymore. We've seen too many other great comic book movies that have raised the bar, and this just doesn't cut it anymore. Overall, I would say that this movie is about the same level as Green Lantern. The cast, they're all serviceable. They all do their best, but the material to truly excel isn't there. So many characters are too poorly written. There are just not enough scenes where they can really excel, and really take their part to the fullest. The material just isn't there. That's one of the things that really bogged the movie down. It's kind of poor craftsmanship in a sense. It's not good filmmaking. It's not good from a script point of view. It doesn't really work from an editing point of view. The effects are serviceable, but again, they're not always good enough for 2015. And in some places, they're even distractingly bad, but not quite as bad as in X-Men Origins Wolverine, as some have claimed, but again, not good enough for 2015. The score is pompous and overblown, especially towards the end. And the movie was sold under a certain number of buzzwords, as we know. It was sold as being grounded and gritty and lo-fi and down to earth and Trank's vision and all of that jazz. And it's grounded and a little bit gritty in parts, but not as a whole. As a whole, it's really fantastic and overblown and over the top, and that just doesn't mix with the tone that is set earlier in the movie, because it doesn't agree with itself. It tries to be everything at the same time. And again, this is a property that doesn't naturally lend itself to darkness and grittiness, and they clearly haven't been able to make that work, because it's just really jarring.
Overall, it sounds like there's kind of a negative vibe about the way this movie came off, especially in the time period it did. What would you say you liked about the movie, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate?
Oh, absolutely, because that's what's so fun about the movie, or fun or interesting, however you want to put it, because there is a point in the movie where it turns, where before that point, it's actually pretty good. So what I think I'm going to do is basically just go over the whole movie, where we first go over the good bits,
right,
which is essentially Act 1, and then we'll go over the bad bits, which kind of coincides with Act 2 and the attack on Act 3 of the movie. So the movie, it starts pretty good all in all. It begins in 2005 or 2007, mid to early 2000s anyway, where we then have the young kid, Reed Richards, who is a misunderstood genius who's already working on interdimensional travel. His parents don't understand him. His teacher, Homer Simpson, doesn't understand him.
Was that? It looked like Dan Castellaneta.
Yeah, that was him. That was Homer Simpson. And Earthworm Jim, for so inclined.
True.
So yeah, that was him. It was a fun little cameo. But it's almost frustrating, because then we see that he's clearly a kid's genius, and he hooks up with Ben, and they become best friends. Even if we don't really see their friendship develop, it just becomes this way. And then we jump forward 7 years in time to a science fair, with the two of them still hooking up with each other for some reason, even if Reed Richards clearly is the brain, even though Miles Teller absolutely fails in convincing anyone that he's the smartest guy in the room. I did not buy him as a genius for a second. But that aside, the teacher, Homer Simpson, is really poorly written, because he still doesn't see the genius of Reed Richards after being his teacher for so many years, and flunks him out of science fair. But who else is at this science fair? None other than Franklin Rich and his adoptive daughter, Sue. And they see Reed Richards, and they're impressed with him because they have already been working on interdimensional travel. But they've only been able to send things one way. Reed Richards has figured out how to bring things back. So they bring him to the Baxter building, where his job essentially is going to be to sort out the interdimensional travel and make it work so they can go back again. And then we are also introduced to Victor von Doom from Latveria, not Domashev. They've changed this in the reshoots.
There's that one minor reshoot in the introduction.
Yes, there is a reshoot there. Actually, two reshoots, because there is a scene where Franklin Richards talks to the government about funding, and then he says that he needs Victor Von Doom on the team, and of course they are instantly negative, because we learn here that Von Doom is implied to be some kind of Julian Assange type, someone who is against government and for the freedom of information and everything else. And then later we are introduced to Victor Von Doom himself in his man cave. And earlier on we have seen when the first pictures of Doom arrived online, where he looked like this homeless beggar, and Toby Kebbell described him as a very antisocial programmer who goes under the blogging name Doom. Then people use this picture from South Park with this fat, obese dude who's playing World of Warcraft in his man cave with like all the trash in the background and takeaway foods on the floor, everything. Just like that. That's right. What his man caves look like.
Nothing even more advanced than just torturing kids online.
Yeah, basically. He's just an online troll, and he's like playing video games and watching several things at once on his screens, and he clearly hasn't washed and is filthy and sweaty and everything. And Franklin Richards comes to him and says that you need to clean yourself up and come working, because now we found this guy, Reed Richards, who has perfected your work that you abandoned. That's the thing with this Franklin Richards. He treats everyone like they're his children. Like, he goes on seemingly adopting everyone, becoming a father figure, not just to Sue, but he kind of becomes a father figure to, or tries to become. Anyway, Doom, he comes back to work, and they are able to sort out the interdimensional traveling. And then Franklin Storm, he plants the idea into his three wunderkinds, which is then Sue and Doom and Reed, that they are going to be the first to travel.
So one character we haven't heard about too much so far is Johnny Storm, who's been made actually a lot out of because of the controversy that, has been kind of inflated around Michael B. Jordan. What's going on with him?
Unlike the others, he's a little bit more wayward. Johnny Storm is more of the prodigal son, because while the adopted children, if you will, are all like Franklin Storm in that they're all scientists, his biological son Johnny is more of a rebel, and he's not really into this science thing. So we see him as more of a Fast and the Furious reject who's out racing cars and stuff.
Yet again, Hollywood's portrayal of a bad person is that they like to drive really fast cars.
Yeah, exactly. Drive really fast cars and then crash them. So he's not all that good at it, evidently, because he loses the race. But what he is good at is assembling things. So he's clearly more of an engineer. And after he is released from hospital, his father says there will be no more driving until you come work for me. So he comes to work as well to help assemble this teleporter, which will take them to this other dimension. So then you have Reed and Doom and Sue working on the theory behind it, with Johnny doing the actual assembly. And Ben, at this point, he's still back in the scrapyard that his family lives in and operates. So he's left behind at this point. And now is where Franklin Storm plants the idea into these kids that they are to be the first to go on interdimensional travel. But after they have assembled it and they've tested it on a live subject, then they are going to be the first ones to travel. which of course I thought was really silly, because why would you want the brains behind the operation when they are clearly the only ones behind it? There's no one else. Why would you want to send all of them away through the portal on the first attempt? But
of
again,
course.
That's neither here nor there.
That's the old Star Trek scenario. Like, why is it the captain and the medical officer and the first officer who are always going to these away missions when they can just get killed and leave the rest of the crew in kind of a bind?
Yeah, exactly. That's like kind of the same thing here. So he essentially plants this idea into their heads. This is not something that they thought of themselves. Not a single one of them said, "Oh, I want to go to another dimension." No, he planted the idea, and that's going to be important later. Clearly, the Baxter Institute is funded by the government, and when they hear of the progress with the interdimensional travel device, they become really intrigued for all the basically resources, everything you can gain from it. Doom, of course, is being his asshole self, is against everything. For some reason, he just comes across as really angry and bitter with the world and fed up with humanity, saying that, oh, because the leaders of the planet have destroyed the planet maybe deserves to be destroyed. So they are able to send a live subject, a chimpanzee, into this other dimension, later called Planet Zero, because the negative zone was obviously too comic booky for them. So they are able to send the chimpanzee there and back again. And then the government are very happy with this, and they say instantly, we need to contact NASA, we need to contact maybe the Army, the Navy, to find some soldiers or some astronauts who can go on this first journey. This, of course, is really sensible. You really need some trained astronauts to go to this uncharted territory. This does not sit well with Dumashev, who takes out his little bottle of alcohol, presumably moonshine or whatever, and he starts drinking it, and he convinces Reed and Johnny to drink it with him. And then he goes on this rant about who was the first person on the moon. Yeah, well, of course, that's Armstrong. Everyone knows that. And then he goes on to say, well, what's the name of the engineer or the tech guy that made it possible to go to the moon? And they all come up blank. And then he says, exactly, no one remembers. That's what's gonna happen to us. Probably what happened to that guy. So they decide for themselves to just take the first trip on their own, with no support or anything. No one in mission control. They just decide to take the pod and go. They're not too drunk, because Reed is sober enough to call Ben, have him come over, wait all the time it takes for him to travel across town, and then the four of them, Doom, Reed, Johnny.
So Ben isn't working at the Baxter building. He's just still playing the role of Reed's friend, basically.
Yeah, Ben is still Reed's friend. He's not working at the Baxter building. He's back home working at the scrapyard. The family of Ben works and operates in a scrapyard, so that's where he is, bullied by his brothers and everything. And then he and Reed Richards hook up when Reed comes to the scrapyard looking for a part to make his homemade teleporter work. So the four that then travels to Planet Zero are Doom, Ben, Johnny, and Reed. No Sue. They did not think of contacting her. Doom clearly has a crush on her and possibly some kind of past history with her. The movie's unclear about that, but there's definitely something going on there. And still, no one even mentions her with a word, but they call his long-lost friends Ben. So he comes over, and they are the ones that go to Planet Zero. Then I was kind of thinking of this scene in Prometheus with these two stupid engineers that were afraid of everything until they saw this penis-looking cobra, which was obviously incredibly dangerous. So then they had to instantly go and rush to cuddle with it. And that's kind of what happens when they are in the other dimension in Planet Zero. First, they start like mountain climbing, And then they see, ooh, some green lava over there. Let's go stick our hand in it and see what happens. And that's what Doom does, and he gets sucked up by this green lava, so then he gets lost, and then the whole world starts reacting with earthquakes and everything. So the others, they run back to the pod, and the pod gets compromised in the disturbances. So Johnny is set on fire, something happens to Reed, I'm not sure what, and Ben, he can't close the door properly, so like stones and everything come flying in. By this time, Sue has figured out that something is going on, so she is able to get to the control center and help them get back. And when they come back with the BAM, then she is caught in the blasts, and she also gets these powers of invisibility.
Not because she was with them exploring the planet. She's been relegated to just like the aftershock, the secondhand smoke.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't that anyone prevented her from going. No one was overprotective or anything like that. They just didn't ask her to come along, essentially.
Well, so it was the film writers who were overprotective.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, and then when they wake up, then we are greeted to one scene of bodily horror as they are in government captivity, being explored with the government trying to figure out what has happened. Reed wakes up and then he escapes while the others are left there. And then we jump 1 year ahead in time. And that is where Act 1 ends, and also where the good part of the movie ends, because it's all downhill from here.
So what do you think of that? You mentioned there that there's that year-long leap. How does that affect the audience?
Yeah, it certainly does here. It's really jarring, because one of the things that Josh Trank kept talking about was that he was fascinated by this Cronenbergian body horror aspect of any story, and that was what was done so few times, and what he really wanted to do with the movie.
We're talking something like The Fly, basically, with Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some definite similarities to that. You get that kind of feeling. So Trank was able to mimic that pretty well. However, it was just this one scene, and then you jump forward 1 year. So what I think is that there probably are many more scenes like that, and much development which has been left in the cutting room floor. Because now we go into the segment of the movie that is clearly movie making by committee. Because in the first act, in the first part of the movie, the one that was clearly primarily directed by Josh Trank, there were only some few aspects of reshoot. It was the scene with Domashev or Doom being introduced, and then it was the first introduction between Doom and Reed, where he is referred to as Doom and not Domashev, and then there is a montage while they assemble the pod. That's it for reshoots in the first part. But from here on out, it's almost exclusively reshoots. Again, we can tell that by looking at Kate Mara's hair. Here is just 2-3 instances where she isn't wearing the wig.
Right.
So now we are deep in reshoot territory. If it was Vaughn, he really messed up compared to his previous work.
I wonder if that's a clue then that it was Kinberg.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, because it really falls apart now. But what we see has happened in this year in the meantime is that the 3 remaining, that would be Sue, Ben, and Johnny, are now all working with the government. With Ben, now the Stone Man, not referred to as Thing, but still Stone Man, he's just Subject 1. They use him to go on missions in the Middle East, essentially act as a one-man SWAT team. So he has a number of kills of Taliban
You know, that would actually be a pretty cool movie. It just doesn't actually seem to fit in with the Fantastic Four.
No, exactly. And the reason they are able to convince him to do that is by telling him, we will make you fine again, but in the meantime, you have to do this for us. Johnny, he's getting his powers under control, and they want to start using him as a weapon too. And this is something that Johnny's very cool with. He's quite happy about this, because he has his daddy issues, and he kind of wants to rebel against his father. So yeah, he's all set for going with the army and going on missions. Sue, however, is a little bit more reluctant. She's all about getting fine again.
Has she had any real exposition in the movie at all to this point?
Very little. If you ask me to describe her personality, I wouldn't be able to. Like,
no.
She's there. That's the best you can say about her. Kate Mara does perfectly fine with what she's given, but there isn't much to work with. So she's just there. So she's more in tune with her adopted father, Franklin Storm, who also want them all to go back to normal. And he is of the opinion that the only way that they can go back to normal is if they find Reed Richards, who is still on the run after 1 year. So he convinces Sue to help him find Reed, because Sue is an expert in pattern recognition. So maybe she is able to figure something out from the few instances that they have been able to track of Reed Richards. He's been hiding in South America, and he is working on a one-man pod to Planet Zero, presumably to come up with a cure for his friends. Sue is able to find him, and so they send a squad to hunt him down, led by none other than Ben, the Thing. And they find him, and they subdue him, and Ben is all kinds of pissed off at him, blaming him.
What is he doing when they find him? Does he have a beard and he's like eating uncooked beans out of a tin can?
Almost, because he still wears his containment suit. He doesn't really have a beard, but that's probably because Miles Teller isn't capable of growing one. But he's certainly unshaven. So yeah, again, he looks dirty and filthy, and like he really needs a shave and a shower. But they find him and they bring him back to Area 51, which is where they're kept. So yeah, hey, that's again like.
So this movie is basically Independence Day.
There. Yeah, almost. They're taken back there, and Reed now starts working on the army teleporter, which he sorts out in less than 10 minutes because he's so genius. And then a new team is sent in, not the four, but a team of astronauts. They go into the other dimension, this Planet Zero, and there they meet Doom, who looks utter crap. The pictures that were leaked early on in the production, this image of him where it looks like he's wearing like black garbage bags that are melted around his body, that's exactly what he looks like. He looks utter garbage, only with green glitter. They find him there and they take him back. And then this army dude, or this government man, goes to talk to him, and of course this is then this angry Julian Assange type who decides that instead of giving the government all this power, it's far better to destroy the world. His powers, by the way, are identical to the Akira-like powers we see in Chronicle, where he can manipulate matter by thinking about it, moving objects around, killing people from a distance by exploding their heads and stuff. That's what he does. So he wreaks havoc. He goes back to the teleporter after messing the place up, and then he sends himself back to Planet Zero, and he creates a black hole in the process, which then is going to suck up the entirety of planet Earth given enough time. Back on Planet Zero, using the powers of his mind, he creates this portal that we see in the trailers. Basically what it does is that all the matter sucked in this black hole from Earth gets sent into Planet Zero instead. Why? I don't know, but evidently he thought that was cool or something. And so the remaining four decide that they have to stop him, and they do so by getting sucked into the black hole, and then they find themselves on Planet Zero, where they quickly come to the conclusion that he is stronger than any one of us, till Reed says that, but he's not stronger than all four of us. So now we are in Act 3. And this really doesn't last more than a couple of minutes. They just go and they vanquish him, and he is seemingly destroyed, obliterated. That's what it looks like. They return to Earth. They are given a government facility for their troubles, and then they come up with the name the Fantastic Four in the most stupid way possible. The end.
Wow, it sounds like they pretty much just needed another 25 minutes in there.
And probably there was another 25 minutes in there. This movie clearly has suffered a lot in editing.
I guess the problem here we see at this point is they've removed too much, added too much.
Yeah, pretty much. Because what I've read, this is just a rumor, but it seems quite plausible, is that there were 40 pages of script being reshot. And that should translate to more or less 40 minutes of footage in a 90-minute movie.
Right.
Take away 10 minutes for credits, then you've left with like 80 minutes of screen time. So that's like 40 minutes of original footage and about 40 minutes of reshot footage. And that fits pretty well with the movie being split roughly in the middle between what was Trank's take on it and the committee by the end. So half the movie appears to be reshot, and it's that second half that really comes across as a mess. And I am reminded of another situation. A few years ago, there was this movie, Exorcist: The Beginning, which had a similar thing, where they first hired director Paul Schrader to work on the movie, and he delivered his cut. The studio weren't happy with it, so they called in Rennie Harlin to reshoot more or less the entire movie.
So he's just pretty much a poor man's director for hire.
Yeah, he's a corporate director who will film whatever is in front of him, but his movies generally aren't all that good. Of course, that movie didn't really work out, because his version turned out to be worse than the original version of the movie, which was later released for that very reason. And I think that situation is not entirely unlike what we see here, because clearly Josh Trank's vision does not fit the Fantastic Four. He should never have been hired. I have no doubt that Josh Trank delivered a better standalone movie in his initial cut than what we now see in theaters. I think the movie was made much worse by these reshoots.
So in a way, he has kind of been screwed by Fox too, not just the audience and Marvel.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because the movie that we see here is clearly only partially Josh Trank's vision, and yeah, he has been really screwed. This is something that Simon Kinberg, I'm sure, will be very happy to blame on Josh Trank. But as the screenwriter, he has to take much of the blame, because the story just doesn't work, and that's his fault.
So there's been a lot of talk about how Thing is going to come across in this movie. One thing that we had discussed a lot was the fact that he was going to be a eunuch, and there was some discussion that his special effects were pretty low grade. How did that come across? The
character of Ben Grimm is completely and utterly destroyed in the movie. In the comics, for comparison, Ben Grimm, he's a tough guy. He was a former gang leader, now reformed, and he's the best friend of Reed Richards, who will always have his back. In this movie, because Simon Kinberg thought it was more interesting, Ben Grimm is instead a victim. He's a victim of his bullying big brother who beats him up and berates him. So Billy Elliot portrays him as a very broken, kind of somber person. We very rarely see him smile. And then when he becomes the Thing, yeah, it's true, the Thing is a eunuch. We already knew this. But we don't really get to see any personality. He's just like, again, he's there. And we get that he's annoyed with Reed Richards for making him the Thing until he suddenly no longer is, for no reason at all. So he's just kind of there, and the effects are perfectly serviceable in some shots, and they look quite crappy in others. And his size does seem to vary from shot to shot, so it was slightly jarring. His head kind of looks like a gorilla's head, and he looks almost a little bit mentally retarded. His voice, thankfully, has been fixed from the trailers, because in the trailers it was Billy Elliot's own voice, so he sounded like a little girl. His voice is still jarring, but it's a little bit better, because it's run through a voice synthesizer to reduce it a little bit, so it sounds more plausible that it would come from a rock creature. It's slightly better. Still, Vic Mackey, I think, was a far better Thing than Jamie Bell is here.
Obviously, one of the biggest strengths of Fantastic Four as a property is going to be Doom. They get to carry along with them one of the big fan favorite villains. Was Fox able to turn around at all on kind of the early bad press on that? I mean, were they able to realize the vision of kind of the iron-fisted ruler of Latveria?
Well, the iron-fisted ruler of Latveria shall remain in the pages of Marvel Comics, because this isn't it. Clearly Doom in name only. And actually, I'm annoyed that they went back and reshot it to rename him Victor Von Doom. It would have been better if they called him Victor Domashev all the time, because this wasn't Doom. I kind of feel sorry for actor Toby Kebbell, because he is a really good actor, and he is someone who, unlike all of the other casts, has actually expressed excitement and enthusiasm about playing his character. This take on Doom isn't the one that fans want to see, and fans are going to hate this. They've kind of combined Doom and Annihilus into one and the same character, and it doesn't work. Like, his motivations are almost non-existent. He's like this angry activist who wants to see the world destroyed, and it just doesn't make any sense. And he looks utter crap. If anything, he looks even worse than he did in the leaked pictures from the set. I couldn't believe just how bad he looks. Like, words can't describe it. And he still has the cape, although of course it's like this piece of trash that he finds. But they're still there. Perhaps the most iconic villain in the Marvel Universe. This is the character who Darth Vader is a ripoff of. And this is the treatment. By far the worst on-screen incarnation of Doom ever.
So what do you recommend for people to do about this movie, like when they're looking for something to do this weekend? I mean, do you think they should check it out and kind of see like the bad patchwork imagery of the movie? Or do you think they should kind of wait for it to come out on TV at some point?
I cannot in good conscience recommend someone to go see a movie in theaters because it's bad. Especially not when it is a rights grab. And I do not think that the studio behind it that has screwed so many over, Josh Trank, has been screwed over big time.
You don't think the karmic imbalance quite matches the fact that he was, by all reports, pretty abusive of his colleagues?
Josh Trank was no doubt an unprofessional ass on set. However, I think that he really gets a bum rap here, and that the punishment maybe doesn't fit the crime, because this is going to cost him his career. And Josh Trank probably should stay to something like Chronicle. He should be doing his own original movies. He probably has no business doing these blockbuster films. He clearly isn't thick-skinned enough for it. But this movie, I think, probably has destroyed him. You see that in the Comic-Con footage. You see when he sits down and he greets the audience, that's a broken man. And he no doubt had issues from before. But I think this experience has really compounded them. And also, yeah, he acted unprofessionally and he was fired from Star Wars over it. And he's not going to recover with this movie here now being released. So I can only imagine he must be in hell. What Fox does not deserve is to be awarded by people going to see this movie. This is a movie that I don't think the shareholders of Fox should be awarded for what they've done because of the politics behind it. They clearly didn't want to make the movie to begin with. We know this from the issues behind the scenes. I think the reports that Fox reacted to that Trank's cut was long and boring and without action were true, and their attempts to make the movie more exciting and more action-filled have really destroyed it.
Yeah, it's too bad that the world couldn't stand for a maybe more paced superhero movie. It at least would have been something more watchable, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's also part of the problem. This movie is so short. It feels really, really rushed. It feels rushed and drawn out at the same time.
So is there a post-credits thing here? I think I'd heard that there was some teasing at a sequel. Was that done within the movie proper or something after?
The only teasing for a sequel was the really cheesy way in which they came up with the name Fantastic Four. There's nothing to promise anything to come. There's no hints of any further action. All storylines are neatly tied up and resolved. Do
you want to stick a score on the movie?
3 out of 10.
Out of 10, damn.
Yeah, if I were to rate it, I would give it 3 out of 10.
So you're perhaps being even kinder to this movie than Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I can't blame them, and I imagine that the positive reviews aren't all that positive either.
No, absolutely not. In fact, the first positive review to be posted actually said the movie didn't have the steam that it took to make it through 90 minutes, let alone a franchise. So if that's what you're counting as a positive review, they've got some problems here.
Yeah, exactly. This movie was never going to be a good Fantastic Four movie. It could have been a perfectly fine, serviceable, standalone movie called Fantastic Four, but that had nothing to do with the Fantastic Four. And I think that the initial cut by Josh Trank probably was better, but it's been completely and utterly butchered in post by Fox.
Think there's any chance maybe we'll get to see it someday?
As far as we can tell, the initial cut by Trank was never completed. It was just like a working print, but they never completed any effects on it. If they were to release that, they would have to devote another few tens of millions to finish it up. I don't think we're ever going to see another cut of the movie.
In any event, once everybody's had a chance to see the movie, we'll follow up with a post-mortem of the film, possibly even with a couple of guests. It should be fun, so check back with us for more Fantastic Four Fallout. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can catch all of our upcoming videos. For more podcasts, news, and reviews, check us out at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.